What it do, mi gente? It's Melany Moves, and you're watching Blacktinidad. On today's episode, we're gonna highlight Afro-Latinx sports heroes. Like in other areas, oftentimes Black Latino sports figures have been assumed to be African American, or just have not had as much amplification as their American counterparts. For that reason, we honor and highlight them today. Some of today's Black Latino sports figures are Carmelo Anthony, Victor Cruz, David Ortiz, Sofina de Jesus, my good friend Masi Arias, Maria Isabel Urria, Idales Ortiz, Osladis Menendez, just to name a few. Today, I'll focus on three: John Wesley Carlos, Minnie Miñoso, and Roberto Clemente. I bet you recognize this iconic photo from the 1968 Olympics. The bronze medalist in this photo is John Wesley Carlos. John Wesley Carlos is a Cuban-American track and field Olympic medalist and professional football player. He was the bronze medal winner in the 200 meters at the 1968 Summer Olympics. This photo of him doing the Black Power salute on the podium with Tommie Smith caused much political controversy. Carlos became a founding member of the Olympic Project for Human Rights and actually wanted to boycott the 1968 Mexico City Olympic Games altogether, unless four conditions were met: the withdrawal of South Africa and Rhodesia from the Games, the restoration of Muhammad Ali's world heavyweight boxing title, the racist president of the IOC, Avery Brundage, to step down, and the hiring of more African-American assistant coaches. The boycott failed after the IOC withdrew invitations for Rhodesia and South Africa. He and Tommie Smith decided to stage a protest. After his third place finish, Carlos and Smith, who came in second, made headlines around the world by raising their black gloved fists at the award ceremony. Both wore no shoes and black socks to represent African-American poverty in the United States. Now let's talk about Minnie Miñoso, also known as the Cuban Comet and Mr. White Sox. He was a Cuban professional baseball player. He began his baseball career in the Negro Leagues in 1946 and was an all-star third baseman with the New York Cubans. In 1948, he was signed by the Cleveland Indians of Major League Baseball after the color line fell. Miñoso went on to become an all-star left fielder with the Indians and the Chicago White Sox, the first black Cuban in the major leagues and the first black player in the White Sox history. In 1951, as a rookie, he was one of the first Latin Americans to play in an MLB All-Star game. Minnie Miñoso once described a clubhouse encounter with Cleveland Indians teammate Harry Simpson. Simpson insisted that Miñoso was not black. Both the US-born Simpson and the Cuban native Miñoso began their careers in the Negro Leagues, and both suffered from the indignities of Jim Crow in spring training camp and in the minor leagues. The gotcha though, Harry was light-skinned and Miñoso was dark-skinned. Imagine? Last but certainly not least is Roberto Clemente. I'm gonna read a little excerpt from the Baseball Hall of Fame, baseballhall.org. Born on August 18, 1934, in Carolina, Puerto Rico, Clemente excelled in athletics as a youngster, and at the age of 17 was playing for the Santurce Crabbers of the Puerto Rican Baseball League. The Dodgers signed him the following year, and by 1954, he was playing for their AAA team in Montreal. During the next 7 years, Clemente won 4 National League batting titles, the 1966 National League Most Valuable Player Award, and began a string of 12 straight Gold Glove Award seasons in the right field. Which brings me to our guest for today, who is a descendant of none other than the Hall of Famer, Roberto Clemente. So stay tuned, join us back here on Blacktinidad. What's goody, mi gente? We're back here on Blacktinidad, and today we have a fellow New Yorker on the episode. We're interviewing none other than Ramon Clemente. Ramon, how are you, Papa?
No, I'm good.
Hey, you can hit me with a year.
I don't want to get too crazy. Yeah.
It's okay. You're from Queens. Talking smack. But anyway, so excited to have you here on the show today. Today we spoke about like Afro-Latinx and Black Latino sports figures. So how about you tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do?
Well, my name is Ramon Clemente. Born and raised in Queens, New York. Uh, as far as my background, my dad's fully Puerto Rican. Grandmother's from Santurce, and my grandfather's from Bayamon. I play professional basketball like 12 years in right now. I've been playing with the Puerto Rico national team since 2013. So as far as basketball, I'm well decorated. You know, I'm still going, kind of like a super OG right now in the game, but I'm still moving and grooving.
Hey, still moving and grooving. So
Yeah.
tell me, I mean, New York is a big basketball city, at least like street ball. So how did you get into basketball in New York?
I always hoop, you know. I didn't have a big name in New York at all. I just hoop. You know, everyone knew me and stuff, but I never really took the game serious until I was actually told I could play college. I was more like in the streets, just, you know, hanging out and just, you know how it goes in New York. I was just one of them kids out there that happened to play basketball and just happened to be good at it, you know? And I just didn't really know my potential until I was actually told, you know, like, yo, you can do this, just take it serious. So once I took it serious, that's when it was time to, you know, turn things up a bit.
Nice, nice. And what college did you play for?
I went to Wichita State.
Wichita State. Yeah, my brother was just like, hey, he played for Wichita. I'm like, probably.
I went to Wichita State in Kansas.
Okay, and how'd you end up? I mean, now you're telling us, you know, you have Puerto Rican, and what coincidence is it that you end up playing for the Puerto Rican national Puerto Rican basketball team, right? So talk about that. How did you end up playing for Puerto Rico?
It's crazy because, like, well, for one, I've been Puerto Rican my whole life, so it's not like some people like find out that they're Puerto Rican later on in life, and it's like, oh, I want to play. But mine's is like my grandfather's English is like really bad. It's like there's one of my pops to speak full blown Spanish, so there was no hiding that. So, you know, I started playing in 2009, and I've been getting invited to the national team. They never let me come to a practice. And 2013, they just called me one day like, yo, how would you like to represent the national team? And I'm like, yeah. They was like, we need you on the plane tomorrow.
Whoa.
And I never looked back since. I've been on the national team every year since, representing the island.
Nice. And how did Puerto Rico receive you? And how was that, like, going from, you know, a New Yorican environment to like a super Puerto Rican environment?
It was all love for sure. At first, I don't think it was as embracive. I don't think it was anything, but I just think it wasn't as noticed. You know what I mean? I don't think it was anything against me. I just think it wasn't really noticed like that. But to see my size and the position that I play, I think I was more embraced because I represent what a Puerto Rican is, and that's like with heart, you know, and I go hard for the island. I go hard with that Puerto Rico across my chest. So I think the people of Puerto Rico embrace me even more, for sure.
Nice. I love that. I mean, you know, Puerto Ricans, we proud of bro.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
You already know. There's like, I can't walk into a room without announcing that I'm Puerto Rican somehow. It's usually my hairstyle, my accent, my earrings. But you know what I'm saying? Puerto Ricans, we proud and we loud, you know, in the game. So obviously your name is Ramon Clemente and you are a descendant of the legend Roberto Clemente, which when I was a little girl in the Bronx, we used to have our birthday parties there all the time. Like that is the park to go to, Roberto Clemente Park. So how does it feel to be a descendant of a sports legend? And then also, how does that play into you going to basketball? Like, did you ever consider baseball?
I actually did play baseball.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Look at that.
Shortstop.
Learn something new every day.
No, I played shortstop. As far as the Roberto Clemente thing, it's crazy because every time someone hears Clemente, like I had to know who Roberto Clemente was growing up. There was no way in the world I wasn't going to know who Roberto Clemente was when as a kid. They're like, are you related to Roberto? And I'm like, yo, I don't know anything. So I think about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, JJ Barea, he called up Roberto's widow. He was like, Brooke was on the phone, and I'm like, no way. And I'm on FaceTime. I'm like, yo, I would love to meet you. She's like, no problem. I'll come to the practice. So she came, 2 of Roberto's sons came, and they came to the practice. And I'm just like, you guys have no idea because the Clemente family is not that big. Like my grandparents have 2 kids. They just have 2 sons, my uncle and my dad. And In Puerto Rico, I know my grandma's side, the Sanchez's, but the Clementes, I just don't know. I don't know any Clementes. So when they came, they was just like, yo, listen, you can come over for dinner, come hang out, anything. They embraced me, like instantly embraced me. So I thought that was dope. And then I came over to the house. Me and the mom, we fell asleep by the pool talking. We were both tired. We fell asleep by the pool after we ate. It was so dope. Like, and they just like come in, like make yourself at home. It wasn't no like where everybody had to talk to you to make sure I was good. It was like, dude, like do what you want. We here, everybody, we chilling and we kicking it. It's crazy. I just talked to Roberto Clemente Jr. yesterday, actually. So nice. It's definitely dope how they embrace me, and just what Roberto Clemente just means is just and that's everything for real.
I find that moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, I've always have to explain that there are Black people in Puerto Rico. So how was that growing up? You grew up in Queens, but even so, like you're much darker complexion. Like how was that growing up, being Puerto Rican and being dark skinned and always having to explain like we exist like this? Like granted, I'm not fully Puerto Rican, but we kind of look like this in Puerto Rico too. Like, you know what I'm saying?
One thing I had to do was call my pops and put him on speakerphone. Like, Daddy speaks Spanish, and he'll just go off on Spanish. Like, who's saying that? Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, all right, cool. Hang up the phone. All right, thank you. Bye, I gotta go. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely like that. I think the typical Puerto Rican of what we write on paper is a light-skinned person. Mm-hmm. And you from, I remember one time when I was young, like I was so confused with the complexion. I was in high school. I'm like, yo, I thought I was Dominican for a second, the way, like I was not in Puerto Rican. I'm like, wait, am I Dominican or something? Like, it was like that. It was to that point, but I'm just like, I had to ask my pop, like, yo, Daddy, are we Dominican or are we Puerto Rican? We're Puerto Rican. I'm like, all right, because the kids in school were saying I'm probably Dominican because I'm dark. He was like, nah, we're Puerto Rican. And then my first experience really seeing dark-skinned Puerto Ricans, I went to Carolina. I was at the mall in Carolina. And I was like, yo, everyone in here looks like me. It was like so many dark-skinned Puerto Ricans. So I'm like, yo, everyone here looks like me. So I think it was definitely dope. And another thing also, I feel like me and the time that I'm playing with Puerto Rico and being on TV a lot and stuff, I embraced Puerto Rico so much. I kind of like pushed that culture forward of being a New Rican that's dark skinned, and my Spanish isn't the best, but like I always say, that doesn't change my blood being Puerto Rican. Just because you speak more Spanish than me doesn't mean you're more Puerto Rican. Because I know Puerto Ricans that live in the Bronx and they speak the most Spanish, but never been to Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And for me, I represent Puerto Rico. Like, I go against other countries with that name across my chest and blood, sweat, and tears. And I give a lot to the island. So does that mean you're more Puerto Rican than me because you're light skinned and you speak Spanish, but you've never been to that island? Or I don't think it makes anyone less or more, But,
Absolutely. And there's such a rich like Afro history in Puerto Rico. You said you saw a lot of Black Puerto Ricans in Carolina. They're honestly all over La Isla. Carolina, Bayamón, Mayagüez.
Yeah.
Loíza is the most prominent Black city in Puerto Rico. Have you been to Loíza? Have you like maybe
hung out there? I never hung out there. I'm sure I probably went through there, but I never hung out there. I never hung out in Loíza.
So maybe we need to do a trip. Maybe we need to go to Loíza. That's the main Black city, the port city where most of the slaves came into Puerto Rico from Loíza. It's a port city. And so a lot of like Afro-Boricua traditions are very much alive there. So definitely something that I want to do. So if you want to join me.
No, I'm gonna be out there soon, but I'll have to tell you guys off air. I don't want to reveal it.
It's cool. Whatever you say, we could cut it out. But we'll talk about it more. All right. So now we got all of that out of the way. Let's talk about from basketball transitioning into other things. I find that a lot of people always look at you as the thing that you are and not see the many other facets of you, even though as human beings, we are complex, right? So we do very, very many things. So how is it transitioning now from basketball into what you're doing currently with Push 100 MPH or Push 100 miles per hour? How do you say it?
It's miles per hour, but the MPH is for short.
All right, so Push 100 MPH. So let's talk about that and how that transition feels.
Well, for me, it's like I've been doing stuff off the court like since college. So The pandemic definitely helped out the transition because it showed like I haven't been without basketball for 15 years straight, like nonstop. Maybe take a month off from off season, but I've been going 16 years hard.
Wow.
So the long time I had, I'm like, all right, we're not knowing what's going on with the pandemic. All right, the game's coming back. All right, maybe it's not coming back. Let me start having some fun. So even with that, it's more so fun with me. The transition is really not that hard. I'm actually embracing it. I'm embracing retirement when it's time to come. I'll probably play about me. Like, I don't want to put a number on it, but I think I might do like 3 more years, but still, I'm not going to be the guy that when I retire, it's like, what next? No, I'm putting things into motion. The push 100 miles per hour is more of a transition to motivational speaking. So I want to be a motivational speaker when I retire. So my podcast is just a way of me working on my audience now. So if I have 3 years of playing left, I look at myself, I have 3 years to build an audience and build a name for myself outside of basketball. So just planning ahead of time. I'm transparent on my podcast. I feel like in the world that we live in today, everything is like you have to have some certain type of look and some like an act, and there's nothing wrong with that. But with me, I'm kind of like, I want to let people know you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the people that you see on the screen all the time. It's okay being real and being yourself. And I feel like with some people who do follow what I do, it's easy for me to be on the camera and smiling every day and act like everything is all good. But when you see I get real emotion and I'm telling you what's really going on and things that I'm really going through, hopefully you can relate as well. And I think that's why I have certain people that come to my podcast and tune in.
Nice. That's so dope. Earlier I was speaking with Professor Joanna Fernandez. I interviewed her about the Young Lords. You know who the Young Lords are?
No.
All right, look them up.
Sounds like a gang.
The police and the FBI made them a gang, but the Young Lords, they're kind of like the Puerto Rican Black Panthers, but look them up. They were big in New York City.
I think, do they wear the black flags with the...
They wear the purple berets.
But do they wear the black Puerto Rico flags with the black and white?
Yes, well, the black and white Puerto Rican flag is the Puerto Rican flag for the Puerto Rican independence movement, so that Puerto Rico becomes an independent nation.
Yeah, I had a back and forth with someone in my DMs. We had like a male ego contest. He told me I had 3 white stripes. I should have had 2. But when I bought this shirt, it was actually when we were protesting in San Juan. So I'm like, I don't know like how many stripes it's supposed to have, but I do know I was front and center, nose to nose with cops, like out there. You know what I mean? So regardless of what they sold me on a shirt, that has nothing to do with what I do in Puerto Rico at the same time.
Got it. Yeah, the black and white Puerto Rican flag is the Puerto Rican nationalist flag. Okay. So if you we'll do more episodes on like Pedro Albizu Campos and all of that in terms of like Puerto Rican independence and Puerto Rican colonialism. There's a whole bunch of other things we could talk about in terms of that. But when I was speaking to Joanna, I was telling her that it's so important that we learn how to humanize each other and how we should, as a people, start to relate to each other because we all have the same human condition, right? And we all need to build empathy and vulnerability so that we can just be a better world. So I think it's so dope that you're doing that with Push 100 miles per hour and speaking about mental health and being a man and being a Black man and being vulnerable like that. It's a very, very beautiful thing. So I congratulate you and I commend you on that. And I'll definitely be tuning in.
Thank you.
And reposting. So cool. This has been a really dope interview. How about you tell the audience where we can find you, where we can find your podcast, what social media handles you have, and what else we can look forward to from Ramon Clemente?
Well, most of my social media, Twitter, Instagram, it's my regular Ramon Clemente. I think that's like the only social media I think. Well, all social media, if you just look up Ramon Clemente, it'll come up. I don't really have any nicknames or anything. And as far as podcasts, we're officially on all platforms now. You can just look up Push 100 MPH. You can just put that in the search and it'll come up. As far as what I'm working on next, everything else is kind of like, just like as far as like business stuff is like, that's just like work stuff. But everything else is, the main things I'm focused on right now outside of basketball is definitely my my podcast platform and the YouTube stuff. I'm doing like more blogs and stuff like that. But I'm trying to get more into the media thing. And also I'm trying to like transition into the Latin America entertainment field. That's going to be my next move.
Nice. So I look forward to that. We need to see more Black faces on there because, you know,
I got to set my Spanish.
Kind of whitewashed over there a little bit.
I'm a shake something up. It's going to be pretty.
Go shake it up. You're going to hold him shake it up even though you're from Queens. It's litty. We thank you, Ramon, for interviewing with us today. It's been such a pleasure to highlight and amplify you and what you have been doing as a Black Puerto Rican man.
Appreciate it.
I want to thank Ramon Clemente for sitting down with me. And before we go, I want to highlight some important takeaways from our conversation. I loved how he said that not speaking Spanish or being darker skinned doesn't make him any less Puerto Rican, and that everything kind of comes full circle regardless of how it may start. The fact that he's now playing for the Puerto Rican national basketball team is amazing. Another main takeaway was always to remember to underline the Afro-Latino influence in sports. They have continued to push the envelope in spite of racism, colorism, and discrimination. It doesn't matter what kind of Black you are, your existence in many spaces is in and of itself a political statement and something to be proud of and for the people to recognize. Lastly, he reminded us that it's important to remain vulnerable and to take care of your mental health during times of crises, particularly in the Black and Latinx communities. Unfortunately, therapy and mental health research has been stigmatized in our communities of color. And the work that he's doing with his podcast, Push 100 Miles Per Hour, will inspire our community to be more open than ever before. So thank you for joining us, and be sure to join us next week for another episode of Blacktinidad, where we highlight everything that's Latino, but Black as us.